Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 84, recorded on November 9th, 2020. It is the 41st recorded conversation with my friend Mike. We continue, with perhaps a little progress, our discussion of our different worldviews, primarily with regard to the meaning or meanings of exist and existence, and what the concept of reality is, including its relationship to belief. Disconnected in the middle somewhere of my saying something, and I don't know what the last thing was that you heard me say.
Uh, the last thing I heard you say, you were talking about the existence of my wife when we should just start from the beginning. You were talking about the existence of my wife when you're not thinking, when I'm not thinking about her, and whether she
Yeah,
exists,
but
and and what existence, and we have to define what existence
yeah.
means, basically.
So, did you hear me talk about an extraterrestrial trying to uh, find out whether North Carolina exists?
No,
Okay, so I was saying, what about the existence of my hand?
no, start all that again.
Okay, okay. The problem is that the word exist has different meanings. You wouldn't think that that was so. Something either exists or it doesn't, and that applies to anything that the word exist is applied to. But that is not not really correct. There's a difference between whether or not my hand or that vase exists and whether or not um, pure democracy exists and whether or not North Carolina exists, such that an extraterrestrial could actually find it, uh, or that contradiction exists. Um, so um, the word exist really changes in its meaning depending upon what it is that one says is existing or not. Um, and it has, I guess, primarily to do with something having to do with agreement, like you and I agree that such and such exists, that pure democracy does exist or does not exist, or something like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I would agree that I would agree that agreement is part of and is part of is part of the definition of whether something exists. However, there's something prior to agreement, and that is belief. So these two people have to believe in the same thing in order to agree. So, and this is where my belief systems are become more apparent.
Okay, well,
Uh,
let
Go ahead.
me uh, underline what you just said. Yeah, the word exist is just a word, and we're talking about what the definition of it is. And we're saying that, well, the definition of it may change depending upon what it is that we're saying does or does not exist. But when we're talking about what does or does not exist, that's a belief,
Right,
about what exists or not. Yes. So,
right.
um,
So I think, and I told you about this before, when you're trying to substantiate the existence of an entity outside of one or two persons' personal beliefs about their existence. You're appealing to something that it's just, in my opinion, imaginary. There is nothing outside of an individual's personal beliefs that can substantiate something's existence.
Well,
That's
now,
my position.
okay, so um, imaginary um, is,
For lack of a better word, imaginary.
I know, it is the ability to imagine, to in some way have an internal experience that one would say is the imagining of such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that I can imagine certain things that I know are not so, or that I, by know I mean believe strongly, are not so. Um, uh, so again, much of what we're dealing with is a set of linguistic issues, how we're using language.
I
We
think
wouldn't
that's part of it, but I think it's more than that also. I think there's a conceptual, there is something conceptual, that there is something in your argument that I fundamentally disagree with, and that is an appeal to something other than someone's personal belief to substantiate something. I don't think that exists.
now say this again.
Um, I think it's more than just a linguistic difference in how we're using words.
Uh-huh.
I think that I'm objecting to something you're using, an idea that you're using to substantiate an entity's existence that is not someone's belief. I maintain the only thing that can substantiate something's existence is someone's beliefs. And I think in your argument, you're saying, no, 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 there's something else that can substantiate it. And
Well,
I claim that is imaginary.
what do you mean substantiate?
That it validates the existence of an entity. So if I believe um, in kind of the, let's take a non-controversial one. If I agree, you had said earlier that the criteria for something to exist is it's two people coming to agreement that it does exist.
Well, no.
Okay, then maybe there's more.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that was what I said could be misinterpreted. I was talking like at a deeper level. No, everybody in the world can believe that such and such exists, and it's still not. So belief is not agreement. Does not bring something into reality. The act of agreement, we can agree to something and be incorrect.
Okay, but how then? Let's just go right to the heart of the matter. Try to substantiate that. How does something exist without a person or a group of people or humanity believing that it exists?
Well, very easily. um, uh, we have a history of that. That belief that the Earth is flat.
but you're looking at that in hindsight.
Yeah.
That's so what you can't look at it. You can't look at it in hindsight.
Why not?
You can't look because that is not an accurate model of someone's beliefs. Somebody believes something in the present moment now. They don't believe something in the by looking backwards in time. So if you're going to assess whether or not you can something exists without somebody believing in it, you have to only use the present moment as its reference frame. You can't look backwards because, for example, in your argument, when people believed the earth was flat, they were having that belief in the present moment 1,000 years ago. So you can't kind of look back in time with what you currently believe to be the truth and claim, well, what we believe then was wrong. Because what we could believe now is wrong.
Why not?
Because we don't have the benefit of hindsight.
Huh? Say it again.
Because what we could believe now is wrong because we don't have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, but we do have benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, but let me try if I could say this again.
See, like for instance, when
You
you
can't, but
when you
I have to learn how
in
to
this discussion, when you in this discussion talk about what I just said, that's hindsight.
But that is outside of that is outside the argument we're trying to analyze. We are
Wait.
trying to analyze whether we are trying to make a decision, to come to agreement whether or not belief is necessary for something to exist. And to say that, to characterize somebody's belief that they had in the present moment 1,000 years ago with the benefit of hindsight is applying a perspective that we have that these people 1,000 years ago didn't have. You can't, that completely invalidates the argument. That basically that introduces an idea. Hindsight is the idea that's introduced that is definitively impossible for the people that existed 1,000 years ago. So you can't use hindsight to kind of argue that their beliefs were wrong. That's just one way I can argue this. I can also argue it by showing that our state right now in the 21st century is exactly the same state that people had in the 15th century. They both existed in the present moment with knowledge that they considered to be 100% accurate, and their beliefs were derived from that sense of accuracy. Whether or not 1,000 years passed, whether or not in the present moment, which is 1,000 years ago, which is 1,000 years in the future, we know they're wrong. It could be that 1,000 years from now, we were wrong.
Yeah.
It's so to introduce the idea of hindsight to show the existence of an entity independent of belief, when our beliefs are basically what we use to substantiate the existence of entities, the same way they did 1,000 years ago. Their beliefs substantiated the existence of entities.
See, there's a in my mind, a very muddled confusion of concepts here. Let's clarify, make sure that I'm understanding. It sounds to me like you're saying that if you believe something exists, then it exists. Is that correct?
If you believe something exists, then it exists. Yes, I would agree with that statement. If somebody believes that God exists, then God exists. If somebody believes God doesn't exist, let me even expand that. If somebody believes that God exists, then God exists until they no longer believe he exists.
And so all of a sudden he dies, like the death of God.
No, 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 no. That there is, well, perhaps. Although then the person who's having that belief, that's one option. One option could be like, well, God died. Another option could be, I was wrong about my past belief. He never existed. That could be another
Well, no,
option.
that would be uh, when you believed that God existed, he did not exist. But that's contrary to what you were saying, that if you believe something exists, then it exists.
Okay, well then maybe we have to go back to what constitutes the existence of something.
Uh,
What constitutes the existence of an entity? So I had claimed it was belief, and you claimed it's something else. So if you can, I'm going to give you pushback on your argument now. I'm willing to believe that, but if you can show it, you have to show something other than belief can substantiate the existence of an entity.
well, okay, maybe it's what comes to mind is the model that we were talking about a little bit earlier about what belief is and so forth. Um, oh, now it got away from me. See, it goes back, it connected to it is this whole idea of the word exist means different things depending upon what we're attaching it to.
Well, that's less true for me. I think in the final analysis, what if belief and existence are the existence of an entity it necessitates belief in that entity existence. So it's very strongly tied to belief, very strongly tied.
Well, I think yes, but I think it has to do with what the meaning is. It's not a statement of some kind of fact that could be right or wrong. It has to do with the meaning of the words that we're using. This is not easy to grasp. The first place, let's see. So we realize that the word exist does mean something different depending upon what it is attached to.
Can you give me an example?
I did.
Can you do it again? I don't recall.
Okay.
Give me two or three examples of using the word existence differently.
Yes. There's whether or not your car exists. That's one example.
Okay, and that example is that is an example of what definition of existence? That's what, tie the examples to a definition. That's what I'm having trouble following.
Oh, well, I haven't done that. And I think
No, yeah, could you?
that
The different types of existence.
you're right. That's unexplored at this point.
Okay.
Right now, all I'm doing is calling your attention to it. The whether or not your car exists, the word exist means something different than whether or not true democracy exists, or whether or not North Carolina exists. I guess
Okay.
because one would have to use different methods for determining whether it was true or not. So my initial idea about what the underlying an underlying factor might be would be agreement. Of course it would, because if we're talking about existence being a word and what the definition of it is, definition is just agreement to use a word in a particular way. Now, of course, one could be all by oneself and make up a word and have it apply to such and such. So for that person, the agreement was between self and self. um, but in discourse involving more than one person, the words, in order for the discourse to have any kind of effectiveness or utility, the words have to mean pretty much the same thing to both people. Otherwise, they will be doing like you and I and disagreeing all the time. Yeah, go ahead.
The reason why I wanted to stop you is because I'm not fully in agreement with how you are proceeding with the idea of existence having multiple definitions. I think I think a more accurate statement of existence and that word is that there is one of hierarchy. There is a single definition of what existence is, and then within that set there's multiple subsets of which you defined. There's existence by definition, there's material existence, there's all different types of existence. Those are only two that I can think of. But however, there is a master set, and that master set is, for something to exist, the word existence means something out. It means the existence of something independent of your subjective experience. For example,
experience exist?
What's that?
Does your subjective experience exist?
Only if I believe in it. So I guess not necessarily. And that's definitely a
But it's only whether you believe
a potential, right. There are definitely people out there, I think, that may not believe in the exclusivity or their subjective experience. So I think, yes, it's possible for you to say, yes, it is possible for you to say subjective experience does not exist. But because what you're trying to do in that argument is appealing to some kind of objective definition of subjective experience that is outside your subjective experience. And that is why I say there is actually a global definition of existence. And that's what I'm referring to, that I think applies to all these subsets you're talking about. And that is the idea. What?
Yeah.
And that is the idea that existence means something outside your subjective experience. It means the substantiation of an entity independent of your subjective experience. That applies to every definition.
Does my current confusion exist? Does my when I am feeling happy, does my happiness exist?
And am I going to answer that question? Do I think it exists, or do you think it exists?
Does it exist? According to your
maybe. Well, that's easy. Maybe, not necessarily.
According to your definition, it can't, because you're saying that it has to be outside of your subjective experience.
Well, but that's my point. So you have to ask yourself who is, from what point of view you're talking about. Does it exist? Does it exist for me? Does it exist for you? What
Uh,
reference point are we using here? Well, I'm
uh,
going to answer that question. What reference point, when
wait,
you ask me, am I happy? What
wait,
reference point do I use to answer that question?
wait. You have introduced a new term, exist for. Like,
I don't want to confuse the topic. I'm going to rescind my use of that word because I don't want to confuse the matter because we're making progress here. So you need to explain. I need more information to answer that question. What frame of reference am I going to use to answer that?
we have to remember that whether something exists or not is separate from whether I believe it exists or not.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to show. I won't. I think you're using that idea axiomatically, and I don't want to accept things axiomatically unless it can be. There are very few things that I accept axiomatically. So
Okay,
you need to show that. That's what we're trying to show.
well, axiomatically, you don't show it.
Well, I don't think it can be shown. So are you willing to accept that it's axiomatic? That we just need to. You're basically saying that the same thing that you use in your model idea. That okay, well, we're just going to assume that reality exists outside subjective experience and leave it at that. I mean, that's not. I don't think that's appropriate for a philosopher.
People say that things exist in their subjective experience as well as outside of.
Okay, let's take that in more detail. Something exists that might be a valid example of something other than the definition of existence I was talking about. Something exists inside my subjective experience. That's evidence that there's multiple use of the word existence. I would agree.
Mhm.
I would agree. So then we do have to define what existence is. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and I wonder whether there is a I wonder if there is a possible definition. I know you were talking about the hierarchy and that there's the set of that which exists, and then there's
That's what you believe in.
subsets under that of those things that exist within your subjective experience or outside
I mean,
of.
I think there is. I really think. I mean, I think the best explanation and the best definition. I think the master set of existence is simply what you believe, and then within that subset, there might be some people might want to appeal to some objective, something outside subjective experience that constitutes existence, but they have to believe in that idea to for it to be true. So
But
even in that case, you're still involved with belief. I think that's the master set.
have we not agreed that a belief can be incorrect? That you can be wrong?
No, we could go through that again. You can.
Sounds like we need to.
You see, and this is something that when you were going in the beginning of this discussion, when you were going through that explanation of your perspectives and ideas, um, I was objecting to the line of thinking about beliefs that you were talking, but I didn't think it was relevant because you were just you were doing a synopsis of your perspectives and belief systems.
You do
Yeah, I
not.
do have a problem with that. You can be you can be right or wrong about your beliefs. In that is true but that's it. That, I mean,
let's say
let's talk about what that means
let's
to be
say
right and wrong with your beliefs.
let's say it that the belief can be correct or incorrect.
All right. If you're going to be talking about this, I have to ask, what do you mean by correct or incorrect? See,
Whether
you go ahead. Sorry.
whether the belief indeed leads to accurate predictions.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Uh-huh.
Sounds like you're making it, but sounds like you're making a conceptual leap that I'm not willing to jump with you on.
There's
I think your conceptual belief is that, well, that means there must be some kind of reality outside subjective experience. That is not even, that's not even a strong argument for it, in my opinion.
But we've already said that we don't argue for the existence of reality, that is part of the meaning that we are using and therefore is axiomatic.
Oh,
That
I absolutely want to go that. If I didn't realize you were asking if I agree with that. No, I would not simply, I would not accept without doubt the existence of reality simply because I'm using the idea of reality axiomatically in my ability to predict or not predict something. No, I'm willing to agree with you that we can experience a belief being accurate or inaccurate with result to future consequences, but I can't use that experience to in any way substantiate an irrefutable belief in reality outside my subjective experience. That doesn't follow. I may have a belief in subjective experience for other reasons, but that's not one of them. That argument fails because the idea of reality is axiomatic to what you're trying to prove. We've been through that last time.
Yeah, I internally got a little bit distracted, and so I lost. Can you state it again?
Which part? The whole thing?
Well, yeah, the whole thing.
Okay. I'm willing to agree with you, and I do agree that your ability to predict something the ability to predict consequences that I'll experience could be accurate or inaccurate. I might predict something, I might predict that I'll have a certain experience, and that experience might be different, it might be wrong, it might be right, and that constitutes accuracy or inaccuracy. However, that in no way for me strongly substantiates the idea of reality outside my subjective experience, outside my beliefs, because the idea of reality is axiomatic to what you're trying to prove. It's axiomatic in your argument. It's assumed in your argument.
But I gave up proving it some time back.
Right. Well, but I think right. You gave up proving it, but you didn't give up. I don't hear you giving up on the implications of it. See, what I say is, okay, we can't show it, so therefore it's a big question mark about whether reality exists or not outside subjective experience. It's a question mark.
And that's completely different than what I thought we had agreed upon.
Right. That's why I'm going through this again. For me, it's still a question mark, but I think for you, what you're saying is that, well, the argument with models works in such a it works, it explains so many things. I'm willing on that basis to just accept the assumption that because it works so well, reality must exist. That's not something I'm willing to go to.
But it's a little bit more than that, I think.
Okay.
It's that it is a basic fundamental requirement of requirement is not, it's a basic fundamental phenomenon, I guess, that we have beliefs that turn out to be accurate to a greater or lesser extent, or inaccurate, and that it turns out that if we had believed something else, it would have that belief would have been accurate, and so reality would be no, reality is something a little bit removed from that, but the existence of reality, which is what we are attempting to model, uh, is is something that we have no experience of other than our successes and failures at prediction based upon beliefs about that reality.
Yeah, but that's a very problematic. That's very problematic. I think the course of logic or the reason that you're using, because if I because you're using reality axiomatically in your argument, you're creating like this circular argument. Well, for my argument to work, I must assume reality exists, and therefore my argument proves that reality exists, but it's being assumed, and that assumption, it's just like this big circle.
Yeah,
So because of that, you could replace reality with VR.
but I gave that up.
It doesn't sound like you're giving it up.
I no longer have said that our ability to make mistakes, to be successful, but then to make mistakes and so forth, demonstrates the existence of reality. I'm saying that that's the way we model it. Do you have a different way of modeling it?
Oh, okay, wait, but if that's completely different, if that's the way, if you could say that's the way we model it, I think what you're saying is that's the way we model it, and because we model it that way, it must be accurate.
No, a model does not have to be accurate.
Okay.
So all we can do is compare one model with another and see which is more successful in prediction.
Okay. So it sounds like, if I would have to, let me try to characterize your belief, and you tell me if I'm accurate or not.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like we believe the same thing, so we'll make sure we do this. So it's just saying, we use the idea of reality to create these models. We assume that it exists, but we can't know for sure that it actually does exist. So its existence is still open to debate or questionable.
Yeah, I don't think I would say that, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So let me I guess explain where my beliefs are at.
Uh-huh.
So I would say that I would agree with you. Very commonly, we use the idea of reality as it's commonly used to create these models for which we can be right or wrong about. And that in no way guarantees that we're accurate about reality's existence. It's still a big open question about whether or not it actually even exists. But there is no other, but it is the way typically humans work. But it in no way shows any kind of doesn't show anything about reality's existence. So I'm willing to say I don't know for sure whether or not reality exists outside objective experience. I don't know. I just have to assume maybe in certain situations. It's the way I'm used to thinking. It's habit, but it in no way guarantees it even a little bit to be true.
Can you think of an alternative?
That is just as valid? Sure.
Yeah.
The entire world is what we would consider to be a computer simulation inside of some kind of alien planet, and we're all a computer game for a 3-year-old alien. That is that what I just described would yield the same results for us as your model of assuming the existence of reality.
No, but that model that you were just describing, you made the assumption in it that there
Right.
are these other entities and that surround us with a virtual reality.
Right, that's my point. My point is, because you're using the term reality axiomatically, it can be replaced with anything. It could be replaced with I'm an idea in a fictional character's head. This whole universe is an idea in a fictional character's head, and based on the rules that this mind has set up, I can be right or wrong, accurate or inaccurate. So because it's axiomatic, the idea of reality can be placed with anything. That's why it's invalid.
Well, that would be an alternative belief system. I am just a part of virtual reality, et cetera, et cetera.
Another idea could be that there's an aspect of my brain that creates my idea of reality, and all of you are fictional. Could be I'm dreaming, and you all don't really exist at all. That's another replacement of the idea of reality that would lead to the same.
Problem is that you, in the depiction of that, you stated that something that was uh, outside of your subjective experience, namely your brain.
Uh, no, well, to be more succinct about it, and be more specific, I believe in the idea of my brain. It's a given, and I'm assigning that it's doing something to me. Actually, what I was going to use, the word I was going to use was mind, but I know that you've objected to using that word a lot of times. So whether or not in the model that I'm talking about, the idea of the brain is a fictional, made up thing in some kind of alien's mind, or in my mind. There's nothing physical; it's all an illusion. That's another possibility. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's because you're using the term reality axiomatically in your argument, and it's a circular argument. You could replace that term with everything.
I'm not
Anything.
Circular argument anymore.
It sounds like what's happening is that you are not willing to actually present the argument that you've traditionally made about you can turn the wheel and you can be right or wrong about whether the supermarket is there. Like you've agreed that argument in and of itself may be invalid to show the existence of reality, but you're still basing, I feel like you're still basing your thinking around the validity of that idea.
But again, I'm not using that to demonstrate the existence of reality. That at the end of the last discussion, I realized that my statements about the evidence that we have for reality is our ability to predict The problem is that the the basic way of understanding includes that, as you would say, axiomatically. I'm a little bit worried about that word, but in other words, that it is inherent in that basic understanding. That maybe somebody could have a different understanding. Well, you are claiming that you do have a different basic way of viewing things, and I don't think that that's really so, but I believe that you believe that.
No, I don't. Well, whether or not that my belief constitutes that I do or not, but I would say that I want to introduce subject-object differentiation. I don't think it is possible for anybody. I don't think it's possible. I'd say anybody. I don't think it's possible for me to live without assuming things exist outside of my subjective experience. Okay. So I would agree with you on that. However, the only thing I'm giving pushback on is the confidence that I still feel you're displaying in the existence of a reality outside your subjective experience. It's like, I acknowledge, just because I don't think I could live any other way for any period of time, any meaningful period of time, does not constitute any kind of validity for the existence of reality outside my subjective experience. It just doesn't.
You keep making the statement that I still am talking about demonstrating the validity of reality, and I'm not.
All right. So let me try to understand where you're at now. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah.
I thought that because we have abandoned the argument of models somehow, and accuracy and inaccuracy somehow substantiating the idea of reality. I thought that we were exploring some other arguments we could possibly use to substantiate it. And my claim was, well, the only thing I could think of is belief. So that's not what we were doing. Okay, so what were we doing? I'm confused. Sorry, Bill. Okay,
no, I
what were we
thought
doing?
that we were dealing with the problem of the word exist, and how, and whether there is a meaning to the word exist that would apply to all things that we attach the word to and say it exists or doesn't exist. So,
Right. So I claim that it does. I claim that I claimed it was belief that constitutes existence. And then you brought back the idea after I said, you said, well, what about your
wait.
Okay.
Belief constitutes existence. That sounds like a totally incoherent use of language. I don't understand that at all.
In order for something to exist, an individual has to believe that it exists.
No, heavens no.
You gotta give me an example where that statement is invalid.
When we believed that the earth was flat.
No, but here I am going to bring up the same
saying that it
problem
was
that
flat.
we did before.
It was flat.
You're introducing a perspective that did not exist for the people 1,000 years ago. Hindsight.
So what?
That's because you are trying. I explained this once before. I'll explain again. Because you are trying to explain the way things were 1,000 years ago and what existed 1,000 years ago, using a point of view and a reference frame that did not exist for those people.
I can't follow that. I believe at that time that people who believed that the earth was flat were incorrect.
Let me make an analogy with a person's life. Maybe that'll be easier for me to show what's happening here. I am a child, and I believe that the moon is a reflection of the earth off the atmosphere, which is actually something I believed for a long time. I remember trying to convince a friend of mine about what that was in the sky. And then I get a little older and I speak to a flat earther, and that flat earther convinces me that, well, no. The moon actually is outside the earth, but it's flat. And I accept that as reality. And I say, okay, well, that's the way it is. Okay, that's the fact. That's now what I believe. And then I get to be a whatever 30-year-old, and I take a physics course, and I realize, well, actually, it's really kind of not what it is. It's actually something else. It's actually a sphere, and it orbits, and orbital mechanics, and all that kind of good stuff. Now I die, and 100 years from now, something else happens that refutes, everything I learned as a person. So are you telling me that my belief as an adult, as a 30-year adult in orbital mechanics, is invalid because 1,000 years from now, with the benefit of hindsight, they discover that it's something else? I disagree.
What do you mean by invalid? If you mean incorrect.
No. I don't mean incorrect. I mean that orbital mechanics did not exist because 1,000 orbital mechanics, the way we understand it, does not exist, or the moon does not exist as a sphere, because 1,000 years from now they discover this is all just virtual reality in some kind of alien mind. I disagree. I think orbital mechanics does exist in the same way the Earth is round, but the Earth was also flat 1,000 years ago.
I don't believe that the earth was flat 1,000 years ago.
Because because you are using a point of view that does not exist for the people 1,000 years ago. That is something. What you're really doing. This is why I said you're still appealing to it. You are appealing to the idea of an objective reality outside your subjective experience, and assuming that it exists. And it's just not something that
That is
you've never shown that argument.
It's an assumption. It's not something that
Okay.
that we're coming back around once again.
It's an assumption.
I'm no longer saying that I am demonstrating.
Okay, so then let's take a look at assumption. Okay, it's your belief. Okay, so you believe in that.
Yes, and what I also believe is that is the way it is for chimpanzees and organisms that have brains or nervous systems that model existence in some way.
Right, but it's still a belief, and that comes full circle to what I'm claiming, that the existence of something necessitates someone's belief in it.
No.
Then you're not showing that. I mean, I think I'm showing that.
Well, because
I think go ahead.
We have examples of things being so, even though nobody believed it. What about before Einstein?
You're still using something that doesn't exist. You're using the idea of hindsight. You're using the idea of past and future, which does not exist for the people. It just doesn't exist. It's imaginary. I mean,
Okay,
you don't see
so
that? You don't agree?
yeah, earlier in this discussion, I was thinking,
We should think about this.
we are beginning to uh, be encroached upon by the concept of time.
At least in this situation, we are. But that's going to open up a Pandora's box of problems.
I agree.
Um, it's 5:40. I can go till 6. Can you?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, well, let's not do that. Let's save that for next time. But you know, I think in every argument, let me put it to you this way. I don't understand how, if you are using the idea of reality axiomatically, that doesn't constitute a belief. Hence, my definition that the master set of existence is belief.
I'm sorry?
Hence, my argument that the actual master set of exist, for something to exist, that it necessitates belief.
Necessitates belief. That's something different.
Yeah, that would be my argument. It
Yeah,
necessitates belief.
but other things can necessitate belief also, and that doesn't mean their definition.
Give me an example.
You're getting food at Harris Teeter necessitates all sorts of beliefs. That has nothing to do
Right.
with definition.
Make that connection for me. I don't follow.
There is not a connection. I think it has to do with how we're using words. And I try to be absolutely consistent with my use of words. Sometimes my impression is that you're using words with slightly slippery meanings, and that strange things happen because of that. The existence necessitates belief.
Wait, maybe I said that backwards. Hold on. I want to make sure I see what you say. In order for something to exist, it is necessary for you to believe in its existence. That's what I mean.
Yeah, well, that certainly is not true.
You can show how. I mean, please show that.
I thought I've already done that more than once.
I have never heard it yet.
Okay, let's make sure that what I'm giving an example of is what you're asking for. You're maintaining that for something to exist, it is necessary that you believe that it exists.
Correct.
Okay, that is way out from my standpoint. I think that there are all sorts of things that exist that we have no beliefs about, and that there are things that exist that actually do. There are things that we believe exist that actually do not exist. I would give as an example of that, take one of the belief systems having to do with there being a God, and there are multiple ones, with different gods of different sorts and so forth. So at least some of those, if not all of them, could be incorrect even though we believe in the existence of them.
Right. I think that's, I think, an existential belief in God, I think, is pretty low hanging fruit.
Okay, let's
Let's take a harder one. Let's take the
okay.
existence of an atom.
Okay.
Okay. Now, can you please explain to me how I have person A who doesn't believe in the existence of atoms, and I have person B who does? Okay. Can you explain to me how me as a third person is going to decide what exists and what doesn't, what based on anything other than my belief? What makes the physicists' belief that atoms exist more valid than the theist's belief that they don't?
Okay, and it would be the ability to predict.
But that your faith in the ability to predict somehow having any kind of medium outcome is in itself a belief. That's what I
Okay,
think. Do you follow me there?
well, this model that I'm talking about that has inherent in it the idea of reality and so forth is something that I think is built into us, and we could get all mixed up with our use of words and so on, but that actually the way we live our lives is um, on that basis.
Well, I I have to be careful not to project or not make assumptions about other people thinking like I do. But I could just say, just going back to that idea of God, there's the majority of people in the world who believe in God, in the actual existence, probably have a very different belief in what constitutes evidence of something existing than you or I do. Now, how the heck am I going to show, at the end of the day, when you really distill my argument, if I'm speaking to a theist and I claim God really doesn't exist, when you distill my argument, it basically comes to I don't believe he exists. That's all. It's no more valid than yours. I interpret the evidence and I believe it in a certain way such that it leads me to the conclusion he doesn't exist. You assess the evidence, you believe that the evidence does point to his existence, or do you ignore the evidence?
Well,
Maybe that's your belief.
the atheists point out that it has to do with whether there is evidence for something or not. They don't prove the absence of God. They just say there's no evidence for the existence of God.
But
it's more complex because God can mean so many different things.
right. But in every single one of those meetings, the existence of each one of those instantiations of what God means requires a belief. And if you're an atheist, it requires a belief that a certain set of evidence can either prove or disprove, for me,
No,
the existence of it.
no, they many make that point that they're not proving the absence.
You know, I'm speaking about the derivative of that. I'm speaking about the methodology that an atheist uses and to substantiate or not substantiate the methodology that and the standard that an atheist uses to believe in the existence of God is a belief. They believe in that standard as being the correct one. There is nothing other than that belief that validates their perspective. And I could say the same for a theist.
They maintain that there is a difference.
But right, because they believe in that difference. See, that's what I'm saying. For existence always comes down to belief. That's the master set.
Wait, okay, existence always comes down to matter of belief. Okay, well, that's a metaphor of something coming down to something else. And what that
No,
actually,
what I meant by comes down to,
wait, I'm sorry.
go ahead. I interrupted you. I apologize. Go ahead.
Well, that makes a muddle. That is a metaphor.
All right, forget comes down to. The belief, in order for something to exist, you have to believe in its existence. That's the bottom line.
No,
You haven't shown it yet. I've asked you to. I believe I've had a successful refute for every one of your examples, and a valid refute.
and I don't believe so. I haven't heard it.
Really?
Yeah, uh, going back in time, nobody had the belief that atoms existed, and yet atoms have existed since the beginning of the universe.
Let's stick with an easier example. Let's stick with God, and then we'll go to that one if we have time.
Wait a minute. No,
Okay, I'll take the harder one if you want. That's fine.
well, the problem is those are two drastically different because the belief in God, the person who believes that God does not exist says that maybe God does, but and show me the evidence. And then nobody can show the person the evidence that God exists. But there is evidence that atoms exist.
You're missing the similarity between the person who believes atoms don't exist and the person who believes in God does exist. There's two. They have a commonality, and that commonality is belief. The atheist believes in the standards that he needs to be convinced of the existence of God. In the same way, the person believes in the standards that they have to show that atoms exist. And to say that one is more valid than the other is in and of itself a belief.
Now, but it goes back to the difference. The difference is in the ability to predict. One cannot
oh my God, you're doing it again.
Make adequate predictions and get to and from the moon by believing in God, but one can by believing in atoms and related issues.
Right. Two refutes to that.
Okay.
One, that in no way. Well, I'm not going to talk about reality because I think that's what you're talking about. My main refute, that's still a belief.
What is?
The fact that if I believe in God, I can't go to the moon, that somehow refutes the existence of God. That might be what you believe, and it might be what I believe. It might be valid. That's still a belief.
It does not refute the existence of God. Atheists point that out.
Wait, okay, so then what was your point then? Then I need to ask what your point was. You said the belief in the existence of God does not help us go to the moon. So what's your point there?
That there's a substantial difference, that one set of beliefs works, enables us to do things, and the other does not.
Okay.
To do things.
Okay.
Of that.
To what? I'm gonna still ask you. To what end? So what? What does that mean?
Well, we would not be able to be having our Zoom discussion if what existed was what theists believe exists, or what people 100 years ago believe existed.
Okay. So now so what you're saying is, and that means that the theists' ideas and beliefs are wrong, right? Is that what you're saying? It's okay. I think that's what you're saying.
Well, it depends upon what the implied meanings are of the statement. To say that they are wrong could mean two different.
Existentially wrong.
could mean two different things. One, that, oh, no, it is possible to be certain that God does not exist. And the other could be, there is no evidence that God exists so far.
Okay, let me explain how I think you're coming to your conclusion. You are somebody who believes strongly in reason and logic, among other things, and you believe in in you believe in the ability of reason and logic to guide your beliefs. Okay, there are people out there who don't accept reason and logic as a standard for guiding their beliefs. And
Uh,
simply because I can go to the moon or I can have a Zoom meeting, in no way necessarily changes their belief. It's still a belief. You have a belief, and that makes it valid. Just like the theists have a belief and they make it valid.
Having a belief does not make the belief valid.
Oh,
It just says
please,
we
wait, wait.
believe.
Please, show me how outside of your belief there is any there is anything substantial that should cause me or anyone else to adopt reason and logic as the standard they should use to guide their beliefs.
uh, the ability to have very accurate beliefs, because if our beliefs are not accurate, we make mistakes.
Accurate in against what? Accurate, what does accuracy mean?
The
The
ability,
ability to predict and it happen?
yes, or yes, that's right.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, I mean,
Going to the moon?
well, just anything that you're doing right now.
Okay, so you're saying you're presenting a utilitarian. It doesn't take belief out of the picture. What you're doing is you're presenting a utilitarian perspective on belief, that you should believe in the things that um, enable you to do more things. Sounds like what you're saying. Okay, you still have the idea of belief there that makes the idea valid. You're just trying to use the idea of utilitarianism to substantiate it, which I think is valid for me. I have the same belief, but it's still a belief. Oh no, I lost you. Ah. Oh, there you are. Okay, I was just about to call you. So I said you're using the idea of utilitarianism to substantiate a belief, but it's still a belief.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what it is that you're demonstrating.
You're trying. I think what you're saying is you should that it is reasonable to believe. It is reasonable to have beliefs that allow you to do more things, like go to the moon. Like if you can show I can go to the moon using these ideas, well, you should believe in those ideas. Okay, that in itself is a belief that is substantiated by a utilitarian point of view, that there is utility, there is reason, there is benefit to me and you and all of humanity by believing in something that can be shown works. But that's still a belief.
Yeah, you slipped into ethics, what should and should not be, and
Because
therefore
that I didn't do that. I think you had done that, Bill.
no,
You had said, well,
I
you
don't.
had used the word should. You should believe if we can go to the moon, then I think actually you should believe in it is better to believe in those ideas than continue to believe because those ideas are not accurate.
Well, yes, I am in favor of, I do have the ethical belief that my beliefs should be as accurate as possible in any areas that affect decision making that has to do with um, quality of life, etc.
As do I, but I still recognize you and I still have a belief, and it's our belief that validates that.
Wait a minute, I don't know what you mean, but belief validates that. I don't know what that means.
you and I both believe, you and you and I both believe. It is our belief in the idea that being accurate leads to positive results, and on that basis, we should believe in ideas that allow us to predict better and be more accurate. That is still a belief that you and I have, and our belief in that idea makes it so for us. It does not necessarily make it so for anyone else.
Okay, here is the word for coming in. That happened earlier in our discussion. Makes it so for us, exist for us, exist
Right.
for me. When you put in the word for, it generally is changing the meaning of what one was talking about from that which is generally meant
Okay. So then I won't even.
to a kind of postmodern sort of thing.
Then,
Well,
then I'll just then I'll
what,
state it differently.
what is real for you may not be real for
Then I'll,
me.
but that is, I mean, your inability and your unwillingness to simply admit that after all of the evidence had been showed is incredulous to me. It is so obvious that's true. But I'm going to even, I'll just state it a different way then, if you don't want me to say for me and for you. The idea that we should believe in those things that are lead to more accurate predictions is simply a belief and a preference that you and I have, period.
Well, ultimately, ethics is a matter of preference, correct? The shoulds, and I, I am Humanian, and so I believe that I believe in and or accept arbitrarily the Humanian ultimate ethical principle. We should do that which will promote not only the survival of our species, but also as much joy, contentment, appreciation as possible, and as little pain, suffering, disability, and early death as possible for everyone now and in the future. So that's my ultimate ethical principle.
So it's an ethical belief.
It's arbitrary.
And I like that word, arbitrary. So
I just don't like pain, suffering, disability, and early death.
okay. So I still maintain that what we have just talked about, the foundational idea that validates it for you and I, are our belief in it.
See, I don't know what you mean validates it.
It means it's accurate. It's accuracy.
Well, I think no, I can be mistaken. You can be mistaken. So I think there is value in saying that there is that which is independent of you or me. You were talking about stopping at 6.
But this is important. Can you go a few minutes longer?
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate you recognizing the time. I there might be utility to it, and I happen to agree in that utility, but the benefit of it rather. But that is also a belief.
It's a belief.
Right. So I'm going to getting back to the idea that the existence of something, whether it's an existential or ethical matter, comes down to belief. You don't like that word "comes down to." It is necessitated by belief.
Yeah, I think we actually are not going to be able to resolve this in the next 3 or 4 minutes. It's something we need to take up where we left off.
Okay.
But what we are wrestling with is something that is sort of downstream from the idea of existence and whether there is a set of that which exists, where the word exists has the same meaning. And you're thinking that it is, and I'm not sure. It doesn't seem
Yeah.
like to me.
Yeah. Well, I also think what we're trying, what I'm doing now is we are really, we're really doing a detailed, thorough analysis of the idea of existence being independent of our subjective experience and our beliefs about it. I maintain that existence is almost synonymous with beliefs, and you are maintaining no, there is an existence outside my subjective experience, and to me, that constitutes reality, which we've not been able to show yet. So again, I think I'm giving pushback on
Again,
the argument.
but again, you're suggesting that we, including myself, are trying to show that existence, and I have already given that up and said that it is inherent in this basic modeling of um, existence or whatever.
Okay, then let me say it a different way. I don't think it's fair that you and I, simply because the idea of reality is inherent, does not necessarily mean that we should kind of accept it and use it to show that other ideas are true.
Okay, but then you could present an alternative. But we
Sure.
are not at a stopping point.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it will mean something for me to have this time before a meeting tonight.
All right, my friend. So stay healthy, and I'll talk to you on Friday.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.